This happened about 2 years ago when I was house-sitting for my uncle in rural Pennsylvania. I was 22, between jobs, and he offered me $200 to watch his place for 10 days while he visited family overseas. The house was old, built sometime in the 1960s, with this massive, unfinished basement that he used mostly for storing old furniture and holiday decorations. The first few nights were completely normal. I spent most of my time upstairs watching Netflix and eating through his surprisingly well-stocked freezer. But on the 4th night, around 2 a.m., I heard knocking coming from the basement door. It wasn't aggressive pounding or anything like that. Just 3 soft knocks, evenly spaced. Knock, knock, knock. I muted the TV and listened. Nothing. I figured it was the old pipes or the house settling, so I went back to my show. 10 minutes later, the same thing. 3 knocks, same rhythm, same spacing. I got up this time and walked over to the basement door. I pressed my ear against it and waited. Silence. I went back to the couch, but I couldn't focus anymore. My brain kept cycling through rational explanations. Maybe something had fallen and was dripping water in a pattern. Maybe there was an animal trapped down there. The knocking happened again, and this time I yanked the door open. The basement stairs descended into complete darkness. My uncle had mentioned the light switch was broken and he'd been meaning to fix it. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it down the stairs. Nothing but old boxes and furniture covered in dusty sheets. I closed the door and went to bed, but I barely slept. The knocking continued throughout the night, always the same pattern. Always 3 knocks with the same spacing between them. The next morning, I convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Lack of sleep, unfamiliar house, overactive imagination. I even went down to the basement in daylight to prove to myself there was nothing down there. It was just a musty old basement full of junk. That night, the knocking started again at exactly 2 a.m. 3 knocks. I tried ignoring it, but after the 5th or 6th repetition, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and went down to the basement, determined to find whatever was causing the noise. The basement was freezing, way colder than it should have been. My breath came out in visible puffs. I swept the flashlight across the space, checking behind furniture. Inside the old wardrobe in the corner, everywhere. Nothing. Then I heard it again. The knocking. But this time, I was in the basement, and I could tell exactly where it was coming from. The knocking was coming from upstairs, from the other side of the basement door. Someone was in the house. I killed the flashlight immediately and crouched behind a stack of boxes. My phone was in my pocket, but I was terrified that the screen light would give away my position. I could hear footsteps now, slow and deliberate, walking across the floor above me. They stopped right above where I was hiding. Then the basement door opened. I could see a sliver of light from upstairs cutting down the stairway. A shadow moved across it. Someone was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down into the darkness where I was hiding. They started descending the stairs slowly. I could hear each wooden step creak under their weight. I had nowhere to go. The only exit was past them, up those stairs. When they reached the bottom step, they stopped. I held my breath, pressed against the cold concrete wall behind the boxes. I could hear them breathing. Then they started knocking on the wall. 3 knocks, the same pattern. They were looking for me. I don't know what made me do it, but I knocked back. 3 times, same pattern. The breathing stopped. Then footsteps, fast, coming toward my hiding spot. I burst from behind the boxes and ran for the stairs. I didn't look back. I just ran. I made it to the top and slammed the door shut, but there was no lock. I dragged the kitchen table over and wedged it against the door. Then I called 911. The police found the back window jimmied open. No sign of anyone in the house or basement. They suggested it might have been a vagrant looking for a place to sleep. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. When they searched the basement, they found something I hadn't noticed in my panic. On the wall where I'd been hiding, someone had carved tally marks, dozens of them, like they'd been counting something, or waiting for something. The officer said they looked old, maybe months or even years old. I left that night and never went back. My uncle understood. He sold the house 6 months later without ever asking me for details about what happened. Sometimes I wonder if he already knew, if that's why he really needed someone to stay there, to confirm something he'd suspected for a long time. I still hear that knocking pattern sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. And I wonder if whoever was in that basement found what they were looking for.
This is something that happened to me when I was 19, about 5 years ago now. I was in my sophomore year of college, living off campus in this rental house with 3 roommates. The house was in an older neighborhood, probably built in the 1950s, with a full basement that we mostly used for storage and the washer and dryer. We'd all been living there for about 6 months when weird things started happening. Small stuff at first. Items going missing and turning up in strange places. The TV remote in the refrigerator. My textbook in the basement laundry room. My roommate's keys in the shower. We blamed each other, obviously, and it became this running joke about who was the messy drunk responsible. But then we noticed the smell. This musty, earthy odor that seemed to come from the basement. We figured something had died down there, maybe a mouse in the walls. But when we went to investigate, we found something that made no sense. The basement had been rearranged, not dramatically, but noticeably. The storage boxes were in different positions. The furniture we'd shoved down there was reorganized. And weirdest of all, there was a sleeping bag laid out in the corner behind the water heater. None of us had put it there. We stood at the bottom of the stairs, all 4 of us, just staring at this sleeping bag. One of my roommates, Jake, walked over and picked it up. It was warm. We got out of the basement immediately and called the police. They searched the whole house, including the crawl spaces and attic. Nothing, no signs of forced entry, no evidence anyone had been there. They suggested one of us had sleepwalked and done it. We knew that wasn't true. We set up a camera in the basement that night, just a cheap webcam connected to my laptop, positioned to cover most of the space. We left it recording and went to bed. I couldn't sleep, obviously. I kept thinking about that warm sleeping bag. Around 3 a.m., my laptop chimed. Motion detected. I pulled up the camera feed and my blood went cold. There was someone in the basement. A man, maybe in his 30s, wearing clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. He wasn't doing anything threatening. He was just living, making himself a sandwich at this little card table he'd apparently set up. He had a camping lantern for light. He was eating and reading a book like it was the most normal thing in the world. I woke up my roommates and we watched the feed together. We called 911 and stayed upstairs with the door locked until police arrived. This time, they found him. He'd been living in our basement for almost 2 weeks, coming and going through a crawlspace entrance in the backyard that we didn't even know existed. The guy didn't resist arrest. He just seemed confused, like he couldn't understand why we were upset. He kept saying he'd been taking care of the place and that we had an arrangement. The police found a whole living setup back there. Food, clothes, toiletries. He'd been showering in our basement bathroom while we were at class. eating our food, using our stuff. The detective told us he'd probably been watching our schedules, learning our routines. Here's the part that still makes my skin crawl. In his belongings, police found photographs of us sleeping in our beds. The photos were taken from inside our bedrooms, from angles that meant he'd been standing over us while we slept. We all moved out within a week. The landlord didn't even fight us on breaking the lease. Apparently, this wasn't the first time something like this had happened in that neighborhood. There'd been other reports of squatters, other houses with hidden crawl spaces. I'm 24 now, living in a new city, and I still check every closet, every crawl space, every corner of any place I live. I test all the locks, and I always check the basement before I go to sleep. Because the scariest thing isn't that he was there. It's that we lived normal lives for 2 weeks while a stranger moved through our house like a ghost, and we never knew. How many nights did he stand in my doorway? How many times did he watch us eat dinner? What was he planning to do once he got bored of just watching? I'll never know. And maybe that's for the best. I need to tell someone about this, even if nobody believes me. This happened last summer when I was 27, living in my first solo apartment in Chicago. It was a garden unit, which is basically a nice way of saying partially underground basement apartment. The rent was cheap, the neighborhood was decent, and I had my own entrance, so I took it. The apartment came with this weird feature that the landlord explained during the walkthrough. There was a baby monitor mounted in the corner of my bedroom, hardwired into the wall. He said the previous tenant had installed it to monitor their storage unit in the building's scared basement, and it was too much hassle to remove. The receiver was still down there, apparently. He offered to have it taken out, but I honestly didn't care. It was just a camera in the corner. I barely noticed it after the first week. Everything was fine for about 3 months. Then, one night, I woke up to static. That distinct crackling sound of an old baby monitor coming to life. I opened my eyes and saw the little red light on the monitor blinking. It had never turned on before. Through the static, I could hear breathing. Slow, deep breaths. In and out. Rhythmic. I sat up in bed, staring at the monitor. The breathing continued. Then a voice, barely audible through the static, whispered, "I can see you." I launched myself out of bed and ripped the monitor off the wall, tearing the wires out. The breathing stopped. I threw the whole thing in my closet and didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I felt ridiculous. It was probably some kind of interference from a neighbor's baby monitor. Signals get crossed all the time. I left the broken monitor in the closet and tried to forget about it. But that night, I heard the breathing again. Except the monitor was destroyed and hidden in my closet. The sound was coming from my phone. I grabbed it and saw that somehow, some app I didn't recognize had opened. Baby Monitor 3G or something like that. On the screen was a grainy green night vision image. It took me a moment to realize what I was looking at. It was my bedroom, from the angle where the monitor used to be mounted. I could see myself in bed, holding my phone, staring at the screen. The camera was still working somehow, still transmitting, even though I'd ripped it from the wall. And someone was watching the feed. I deleted the app immediately and turned my phone off. Then I turned on every light in the apartment and sat on my couch until sunrise. When the landlord's office opened, I called and demanded he come remove the monitor equipment immediately. He showed up that afternoon with a maintenance guy. They went into my bedroom, and I heard them talking in confused voices. When they came out, the landlord looked pale. "There's no wiring in that wall," he said. "There never was." The previous tenant didn't install any monitor. I don't know what you had mounted there, but it wasn't connected to anything in the building. I showed him the broken monitor in my closet. He examined it and confirmed it was a wireless model, battery-powered. He asked me where I'd gotten it. I told him it was there when I moved in. He pulled up his records. The apartment had been vacant for 8 months before I moved in. No previous tenant, no monitor installation, nothing. I moved out 2 weeks later. Before I left, I checked the storage unit in the basement that supposedly had the receiver. The landlord gave me the master key. The unit was empty except for one thing: a folding chair facing the wall where my bedroom was on the other side, and on the floor next to it, a notebook filled with dates and times. The last entry was from the night before. It just said he found it. I never found out who had been watching me or how long they'd been doing it before I noticed. The police couldn't trace the app or find any evidence of who'd been accessing the feed. The notebook had no fingerprints except mine. Sometimes I still check the corners of rooms for little red lights, and I never, ever sleep with my phone in my bedroom anymore.